Hare Krishna. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. Lovely to be doing a Vedic Inquirer update. Lots of news to catch up on. I'm delighted to be joined by Saraswati and Sanaka, fearless campaigners for many, many years in the space. And I suspect we might be talking about a range of things today. Saraswati and I are very pleased to report that the Lokanath case has been withdrawn. So our legal team successfully defended it. The judge advised his legal team to withdraw the case. So massive thanks for all your support, both monetary and moral. And we had a great legal team representing us as well. Other things that we'll discuss, we want to talk about the GBC's ongoing interference with CPO, some updates in that regard. We might talk also, time allowing, on Bhakti Vikasha's recent comments, Bhakti Vikas Swami. And let's see how we go on time. We might also talk about ISKCON Vrindavan and ISKCON Mayapur. So maybe I'll invite you to say a few words by way of introducing yourself. Go to you first, Saraswati.
So a lot of you already know me from doing child protection advocation in the last couple years, starting with Lokanath's case mostly. Before that, having grown up in ISKCON, I had heard about child abuse more than experiencing it. But I really got into it with Lokanath's case, and I've helped victims more recently in the last year or two as their representatives in their case, child abuse, and also one adult abuse case involving an ISKCON guru, and that led to him being removed as a guru. So yeah, this is where my heart is at. It's rewarding. It can be painful at times, but I feel like this is what I'm called to do. So, and I really appreciate working with Damodar and Sanaka and everyone else who I've spoken with over the years. So, and also I wanted to say thank you to everyone who supported Damodar and I when Lokanath sued us and Meta and Twitter in November of 2022. That case was thrown out April 2024. Which is a huge sense of relief. So thank you everyone who's written to me and, written online. Thank you so much. Hi, Paul.
Sanaka Ji.
Hari Bolo. My name is Sanaka Ishta.
You're a little bit quiet there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. For a number of years, I have felt drawn, compelled to speak out on the topic of child protection. And I have made a lot of endeavors, and sometimes, and there have been ups and downs, and it's been a challenging process. At times I feel like, wow, we're really making progress, and at times I feel like, wow, this is like washing coal. We're not getting anywhere. And then just a few days ago, I was thinking, because I kind of really started in 2006. And when I look back at how the collective ISKCON world, what it looked like with regards to child protection, the awareness or lack of awareness, the things that were accepted and taken for granted, we've actually made incredible progress. So that's very encouraging and inspiring and reassuring, and it keeps me going. I see, okay, maybe things are not progressing as fast as I would like, but who am I? I don't get to decide the timing. Krishna decides how and when things happen. All I can do is make an effort, and then the result is up to Krishna. And I am incredibly appreciative for there have been, like, ISKCON it's a different universe from what it looked like in 2006 and what it is today. It's a day and night difference. So that's very inspiring. And then there's still a lot of progress to make. And I hope that Krishna will give us the intelligence and the inspiration and the ability to make it happen. And thank you, Damodar. Thank you, Saraswati. And thank you, everyone, for all the encouragement and assistance. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the first of our agenda items. You were saying in our preamble, Sanaka, that the GBC made an undertaking at the time of writing the Lokanath report. From this day forward, we will no longer meddle in CPO. How they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, looking back at the timing of when they said it and what how they have their conduct afterwards, I would say that it looks like it was just a political promise, an empty political promise. It was like, okay, we're going to interfere in Lokanath's case because we believe that the political repercussions of allowing justice to take place in this instance would be so great that we would rather compromise child protection than actually take a principled stand. But to make this devotee society swallow the pill, to make it a little bit easier for the society to swallow the pill, we're going to make this promise. But really, it's an empty promise, because if we so in 2022, they made that promise, and then there is also another resolution I'm looking at, where the GBC is, they are saying that they're going to do an inquiry about the historical child abuse that took place in Sridham Mayapur and in Vrindavan. And there are two promises. Okay, they made the inquiry, and the outcome was that there are serious shortcomings, and they haven't done anything about it. So there's two promises which haven't really they haven't really delivered on these promises. So we have an inquiry. We know there is a problem. We already knew there was a problem. And then they don't do anything about the problem with regards to the Vrindavan Gurukul and the Mayapur Gurukul. With regards to their promise not to meddle with child protection, we have Keshava Bharati's case. So they step in and say, oh, we're not going to meddle, but the GBC is going to officially pressure the CPO, the Child Protection Office, to retire Bhakti Vikas Swami in a palace in Govardhan. And it's
Keshava Bharati.
Yeah, Keshava Bharati. Sorry, what did I say?
Bhakti Vikas Swami.
Sorry, oh my gosh. So the GBC pressure the Child Protection Office to retire Keshava Bharati at the palace. So it's like we want to make sure that those who are found guilty of sexually abusing our children have a comfy landing, because God forbid, they're going to have to struggle. So it's like the priorities of the society are upside down, and until that's the consciousness, it's going to be incredibly difficult to really value children, these devotee children, as much as we need to in order to actually make the effort required to protect them. And then if we look at this year's, I'm jumping all over the place, but if we look at this year's GBC resolution, then they are dismantling the Child Protection Office. They're tearing it down. I have them here. It's going to take a while to go through. I think we're going to focus some time on this, but essentially, their promise not to interfere is out the window. Not only are they interfering with cases, but they're actually dismantling the Child Protection Office itself. This is like a power grab to tear down the Child Protection Office and to make sure that whatever clout and ability the Child Protection Office has had up until now to take some to impose some restrictions on those who offend and abuse children, that's taken away from the Child Protection Office and given to some other body that is under the control of the GBC body. Anyway,
So,
I've said enough.
yeah, Saraswati, you have any thoughts on what we've teed up there?
Yeah, it's 2024, and spiritual societies, religious organizations around the world outside of ISKCON seem to have come to an understanding and acknowledgement that anyone who perpetrates child abuse is removed from all leadership position, and sometimes banned completely. But here in ISKCON, it's like mind-boggling that you see leaders unabashedly defending child abusers, and it's like it doesn't make any sense. And you'd think that to make it look good, they would promote child protection. Like, it's a win-win. Like, you protect the children, you make the families feel safe, you promote trust, and you're also setting a good example for the rest of the world. So, like, why not?
It does beg a belief. We caught news, maybe it was in November, December, that there were moves being made against CPO. We kicked up a lot of noise, and I wonder if, as you just described there, Sanaka, the glossed up version of the CPO, the GBC resolutions, is sort of concealing what was actually in motion. So it's quite interesting. As soon as we kicked up a fuss that it looks like they're trying to exit the CPO directors, although they normally have no contact and take forever. If we send messages to the GBC, it goes into some kind of black hole. We never hear. All of a sudden, they were very quickly saying, no, this is fake news. And then if you read between the lines of the resolution that's just come out, and I'll let you perhaps do the details of this, Sanaka, but it does appear that they truly are sidelining the CPO, making it very difficult for the CPO, even though they've perhaps kept Kamalesh Krishna in the role for another year. But in essence, they're really clipping his wings. And one of the other things we should definitely talk about is this serious campaign by many of the leaders to discredit CPO, calling them as following no due process and so on. And they're not people who have firsthand visibility. They're basing this all on secondhand information by CPO detractors. Anyway, that was just me doing a little segue there. Sanaka, do you want to take us through the wording of the resolution and why it's concerning?
So if we look at the 2024 GBC resolution, the first item is about the budget. So the GBC is the first thing. Good news first. So the GBC, they're informing everyone that they have increased the CPO budget to $54,000, which would be a significant increase. I think it used to be 10,000, then it went to 20. Well, let's backtrack. When the CPO was first established, the GBC was funding $150,000 or thereabouts a year.
And that was in 1998 money. That's not
which is like, I don't know, 300,000 today or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then since Kamalesh Krishna took over, which I don't know when it was, 2016 maybe, the CPO budget for the GBC budget for the CPO came to an all-time low of about $10,000.
Actually, it dropped to 5,000 the year after that.
There you go. They brought it up to 10. Then last year, I think they said they were giving 20. This year, they're saying that it's 54, which sounds impressive. It's a big increase. Now, it's important. So I reached out to Kamalesh Krishna and said, what is going on with these resolutions? And Kamalesh Krishna Prabhu was very clear. He said, regarding the budget, these are pledges. The GBC gives pledges every year. I hardly see any of that money. So these are pledges that I don't know what they're going to get out of these 54,000. I hope they'll get 20, but no idea if they will. He didn't sound very hopeful that they would even get that much. Then I asked him about the rest of the GBC resolutions, and he said, I am afraid I cannot comment on the other matters, but so I would love to have him on here, and along with Anuttama. That would be my dream podcast. Anuttama and Kamlesh. Then we ask questions.
Yeah.
Someday, hopefully.
Mhm.
So then the number, if you jump to item number 4 on the GBC resolutions, it says that, so they're extending Kamlesh's tenure for another year. And they say the ICBO director, so that's Kamlesh Krishna Prabhu, is to prioritize the finalization of any pending cases, particularly those in Bangladesh and Mayapur during this year. The GBC will assist in any way it can upon request. Now, I guess this is positive in the sense that Mayapur and Bangladesh have the things that have happened in Mayapur and Bangladesh are horrendous, truly horrendous, and they're happening now. So it is important. It's good that the GBC is. What I find personally disappointing is that they don't mention Vrindavan for the reasons that I just discussed earlier. So it's like, why Mayapur and Bangladesh and not Vrindavan? The GBC is very aware that the situation in the Vrindavan Gurukul is extremely problematic for so many reasons. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to overlook that. We're not going to get involved with that. Anyway. Then, so the first thing that they're doing is that the first major intervention they want to do is that they want to, up until now, since the inception of the Child Protection Office, the judges were trained by the CPO director. Now, the CPO director doesn't have a say in the adjudication of cases. There is 3 judges per case. They together, the judges look at the evidence and they decide on the verdict. They decide on the merit of the evidence presented, and they, if necessary, they decide on the restrictions. Now, what the GBC has decided to do is that now they're going to shift the training of these judges to the Justice Ministry. Now, the Justice Ministry is, my understanding is that it's run by Champa Kalata. The thing, like, I have mixed feelings about this in the sense that Champa Kalata did a really bad job as the CPO director. So, in that sense, to have this person, this devotee, who has the worst track record of all the child protection directors to date. She has the worst track record, and this is my opinion. Take for whatever it's worth. And you take this person and say, this is the one who's going to train the judges. And it's like, really? Is that really the best you could do? And to her credit, her and Damodar did take a stance in the Lokanath case. And to me, that's a big redeeming factor in her character. I'm still personally not, I am concerned that Champa Kalata is going to be training the new, I think that was a very careless decision. It's like,
Yeah.
why would you pick somebody like that?
Can I say something about her?
Please.
So I was asking around about her and different people's experiences that interacted with her while she was CPO director and handling child abuse cases. One woman said that when Champa Kalata handled her daughter's child abuse case, Champa Kalata kept going to the local GBC member and telling him everything that was confidential. And then he would tell her what to do. And Champa Kalata basically called the victim a liar, called the whole family liars. And then Damodar intervened. Like, he stepped in for some reason. I don't know why. But he said when he took over, he told the mother of the victim, he's like, yeah, when I took over the case, 80% of me said there's nothing to this case. Everyone's a liar, like the family and the victim. And he said by the time he finished the case, he 100% believed the family when he did his own investigation. And then I have a friend in Europe who like spilled out her heart, like she was abused, and she confided in Champakalata, who turned around and told people that that person's a liar.
Yeah, no, her track record as a child protection director was appalling. She also notoriously gave Sri Radhe, she granted an appeal to Sri Radhe that had, according to the CPO manual, it had no merit. There was no merit for that appeal.
Why was this abuse not taken to the police? Well, this comes up a lot, and there's very good reasons why abuse is not always taken to the police. There's sometimes statute of limitations. Victims don't want to go through a whole trial talking to police, investigators, sitting in court and testifying against their abuser face to face. Sometimes crimes happen in different continents, and the victim doesn't want to travel back and forth. You know, they have lives and they can't just pick up and spend a whole year in another continent. Did you want to say something, Sanaka?
When you're done.
Oh, I mean, there's so many reasons. Like, I even wrote a list. There's like a dozen good reasons why child abuse is not taken to the police or not handled in a court of law. Oh, another reason is criminal cases need a huge, like a lot of evidence to be found guilty. Like they need to be found more likely. No, that's the CPO.
Beyond reasonable doubt.
Yes, beyond reasonable doubt. So basically almost 100%. Whereas civil cases, like if a person is suing another person, not the local government or larger government is on behalf of the people suing a criminal and sending them to prison. So a civil case needs a lower threshold of evidence. So more likely than not to have happened. That means over 50%. And that's how the CPO runs. So some victims are like, you know, this is all I have is my statement. This is the evidence I have. Like there's no video recording of me being assaulted. It happened 20 years ago. Abusers aren't going to do it like out in public. Like they're going to wait till no one's around. They're going to try to silence the victim. It's very difficult handling these cases in a court of law. And for some victims, going to the CPO is the easiest way for them to get accountability and justice. And I know with my friend who I represented in her case against Keshava Bharati, like she felt a huge sense of relief when Keshava Bharati was found more likely than not to have perpetrated child abuse, you know, and many victims feel this way. So that's why police and criminal courts don't always handle these types of cases.
Sanaka ji?
There was an instance at the Bhaktivedanta Manor where the devotees called the police. The police looked at the evidence, and their conclusion was, we believe this person is guilty. We don't have enough to secure a criminal conviction. Our recommendation is that internally, you treat this man as guilty and you do everything you can to protect your children. There's nothing we can do here because we don't have the evidence that we need. So the police often has these limitations, and the job of the Child Protection Office is not to replace the police. In fact, the first port of call, whenever somebody reports to the Child Protection Office, the Child Protection Office recommends people go to the local authorities first. A Child Protection Office steps in when the police and where the police will not go. So, for example, let's say somebody is found guilty by the police and he's served 10 years. Like we had recently a situation in South India at Bhakti Vikas Swami's temple with Kripakara. He has done time. He was found guilty in a prison in Australia. He was convicted, and he served his time. It's over. It's now the police is not going to get involved with whether Kripakara can be a guru, or if he can be a leader in ISKCON. That's not the business of the police. That's an internal matter. And that's why we need the Child Protection Office to do the things that the police will not do.
Yeah, I want to echo what you said about the ISKCON Child Protection Office absolutely encouraging victims or adults who have witnessed abuse to come forward to the police. There's almost 2 pages in the ISKCON Child Protection Office guidelines of like step-by-step how to report to the police, law enforcement, and why they're encouraged, like why this should be done. So they absolutely encourage people to report to the police.
So this raises a really interesting angle, because much of this recent GBC reaction to CPO, and it's not, as Sanaka said, the first time they've interfered, but it seems to be based on some misconception about CPO processes. It appears that there's been a lot of disinformation suggesting CPO doesn't follow due process and just has a go at people without due cause. We see one leader after another coming out and spouting this kind of propaganda. And we've seen a certain, I put earlier vast majority, but certainly a high proportion of devotee lawyers who seem to absolutely come down on the side of the accused. It's almost like no one's even thinking about the interests of children. They're concerned about their friend. They're concerned about the person who might have their reputation besmirched. And in the meantime, we have, children on the other side whose lives are, thoroughly destroyed. What do we make of this campaign by so many leaders to have a go at CPO?
It's been, there is this fairy tale, or the expectation that the CPO should be operating on a shoestring budget, and that they should deliver Yamaraj's justice, which means it should be exempt from any flaws. And then there is this, there is another fairy tale that is added to this one, somehow as if the CPO people are infallible human beings. And then there is the other phenomena which is added onto that, which is that in contrast, the secular justice, that is perfect. So why don't we hand it over to the police? So the assumption is that when the secular justice handles things, there is no, they do a perfect job because they are the government, and we believe that the government does the right thing. Recently, I came across the hungry judge phenomena. Are you guys familiar with that?
No.
So if you go on YouTube and you type hungry judge phenomena, so they've done a study and they found that the one factor that determines the whether, so they've taken cases with the exact comparable cases, and they found that the person that gets let out on parole, the only distinguishing factor is how hungry the judge was, how many hours had passed since the judge had his meal. So that's how fickle it is. And this is the secular justice that we have so much faith. Now, with this, I'm not suggesting that we should accept a flawed CPO, but we need to accept that we are in a fallible world. Mistakes will be made, and the CPO may make mistakes. This doesn't mean that the solution is to dismantle the CPO and hand it over to somebody who has done a horrific job at child protection when she was in charge, like Champakalata. She did a terrible job. And I mean, it's the truth. It's like her performance was horrendous. And the fact that the GBC trusts Champakalata tells me that it's another red flag, because the GBC's own track record on child protection is very questionable. So if they say, well, we like this one, it's like, well, why do you like that one?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even that, you know, the CPO are not infallible. There's active disinformation suggesting that they don't follow due process.
Absolutely.
This is people who have no idea of what due process would look like, nor have a first-hand knowledge of what the CPO did. They're simply aiming to discredit the CPO because they somehow think this will favor their friend who found themselves on the wrong side of a CPO decision. Saraswati, did you want to say anything there?
I did want to add two things. I wanted to add something else about why going to the police doesn't always work. A couple years ago, someone I know reported she was being sexually abused during her teenage years. And the accused, the man she accused of abusing her, was videotaped by the police giving a confession. It's been 2 years since that confession, and he still has not been arrested because the jurisdiction of where it happened are notoriously slow at handling child abuse cases. Like you can even read in their local newspapers how bad they are about handling child abuse cases. And this is someone who gave a confession on videotape. So that's just an example of how going to the police doesn't always work. And then number two, I wanted to say that ISKCON is an ecclesiastical organization. It is not a court of law. It is not a municipality. And as an ecclesiastical organization, they can just say who they want as a leader and who they don't. And honestly, they don't have to say why. But we already have this ISKCON Child Protection Office. We have these great rules. We have the policies, and we have the step-by-step procedures of collecting evidence, letting the accused respond, presenting all the evidence to the 3-person panel. And for what it's worth, it's worked. It's just the CPO needs more funding desperately. Like they need staff and they need help. They're totally qualified individuals. Kamlesh Krishna and Gandharvika both have master's degrees in advanced child protection. Who else in ISKCON has that? No one I know. And he's a magistrate. Like he's literally a judge. That's all I want to say.
Well, and the CPO had their procedures vetted and approved by a world authority on child protection. Yeah. And yet others who without information are coming in and saying, no, didn't follow due process because I don't like the conclusion they arrived at with regards to my friend. No examining of their own bias and prejudices. Now, we do have some of those messages from leaders to look at. So let me know when we're ready to go there. But is there anything else before we do progress to those, Sanaka or Saraswati, we want to say about the CPO?
A couple of things back to where we started. I mean, this is a long conversation we just got into. But yeah, it's fascinating to see all these devotees who have been. I would say that from my observation, the Lakshmani case has been the single most, and more than the Lakshmani case, the people, Lakshmani's friends, they have been the strongest force that has undermined and is demolishing at present the best child protection office ISKCON has ever had. And they're doing this, and they are convinced that Lakshmani is innocent, or that her case was mishandled, and they're saying that they're throwing like what's his name, Hridayananda Maharaj came out and said, "Oh, Kamlesh Krishna doesn't understand anything about due process," and I'm like, well, Kamlesh Krishna works as a magistrate. I think most people will think that he's got a better idea of what due process looks like than the biased friend, Hridayananda Maharaj, the biased friend of the accused who's been found guilty. What most people don't understand is that the price we have to pay personally and as a society if we want a strong child protection office, is that we have to be okay with when our friends get found guilty. Because we all know each other. It's a small society. It's a small circle. If somebody does something wrong, we have to say, would I rather defend the protection of children in society, or would I rather throw that to the wind because I think that my friend should get off the hook? And that's the choice that we're making, and the choice that so many of these devotees have made, like big guys, Malati, there's been Badrinarayan Swami, Hridayananda. They have decided to tear down the child protection office because they don't want their friend. They're not. It's like, it's not okay. Oh, my friend, no, she couldn't have done it. I don't believe she's done it. Anyway, can we jump back to the GBC resolutions?
Yes,
Almost
please.
done.
Please do.
So there are. Sorry, I jumped. We really got thrown out of change the subject. So the last thing I mentioned was the fact, the justice ministry. So we got Champa Kalata, who's going to now train the new judges. Now, the interesting thing, and then it says that Kamlesh Krishna undertakes to ensure that he will render the fullest cooperation to the Oversight Committee in respect of sharing information and documents as and when necessary, as determined by the Oversight Committee. Now, if you look at this, the Oversight Committee has not been formed yet, so we don't know who's on the Oversight Committee. So what these resolution is saying, and when I say resolution, I get the impression, I don't know why, but I just get the gut feeling that this is Anuttama's doing. So what they're saying is that Kamlesh Krishna has agreed to hand over confidential, classified, sensitive CPO documents to a body that hasn't even been formed, and he doesn't know who's on there, and he's going to do whatever this body wants. To me, as I mentioned at the beginning, Kamlesh Krishna wouldn't comment on this, but this is one of the things that I can't comment on this. But to me, it seems incredible. If he has agreed to that, it's completely unprofessional. That's why I said I would love to have Anuttama and Kamlesh here. To me, it seems hard to believe that the CPO would agree to hand over information to a body that hasn't even been formed. They don't even know who's on there. Then it's so confusing, and there is a saying that I came across recently. It's like, if you want to kill something, give it bureaucracy. And I read these resolutions, and I'm like, that's exactly what they're doing with this Child Protection Office. So there is these. They're creating the Oversight Committee. There is a CPO Review and Working Committee. There is the Justice Ministry that's going to be training the judges. There is also the ESO. The ESO, what is the ESO? Is another body that is going to be involved in child protection. Will be during the 2024, the GBC will be considering a restructuring of the ICP, the ISKCON Child Protection Office, and its processes based on a review from the Executive Secretariat Office. So this ESO body is going to offer recommendations on how to restructure the CPO and its policies. So now, what I know about this ESO is that there's the devotees I found out that are on there, Nanda Kishore, Parijata Dasi, and Govardhan Das. I don't know who any of these devotees are. What I do know is that apparently none of them have any child protection experience. So it looks like the GBC picked 3 names or maybe more. I don't know if there's more. I've only found 3 names, but maybe there's more. So the GBC picked 3 names out of a hat with no experience on the Child Protection Office, and these guys are going to advise on how this Child Protection Office is going to be restructured. And to me, is like, what? It seems surreal. And this is all 2 years after the GBC says we're not going to interfere with Child Protection Office.
As someone who's worked as an HR director, now I recognize that employment law will vary from one country to another, but in general, if we're going to be citing things like due process, what was really interesting back in November, December, when we learned of the, let's introduce term limits on the CPO director. So out of nowhere, suddenly we decided, look, he served long enough, time to move him on. They didn't have a successor in place. There hadn't been any, let's call it, unbiased assessment of his performance. So it literally just looked like what we might call in the UK constructive dismissal, where they simply decided to exit somebody and they haven't even got anything else in place. In fact, even more of a smoking gun, they had engaged people to search for his successor.
Yeah.
Prior to the evaluation. So this, you know, if it looks like a turd and it smells like a turd, it's a turd. You can dress it up however you like. So I think, yeah, the GBC have kind of been caught out, you know, doing something underhand here. And now they're perhaps trying to do a bit of smoke and mirrors to cover their tracks. But I don't think anyone, a sensible person, is falling for any of it.
So just to be clear, Kamlesh Krishna has no interest in leaving the ISKCON Child Protection Office. The GBC can't find a replacement for him. So then they come up with these other resolutions afterwards to like...
I mean, I think, I suspect that the GBC is, okay, what I suspect is that Kamlesh has not agreed to any of this, and that already we've seen from the pledge. If you read the first line of the resolution about the CPO, it says that the GBC has increased the CPO's budget to $54,000. That's a lie. So when you know that the first thing is a lie, then it is reasonable to assume that other things in here cannot be taken at face value. My assumption is that Kamlesh has not agreed to any of this restructuring, because it literally destroys the Child Protection Office. It makes it powerless, and it gives all the power to other bodies which are controlled by the GBC, which essentially means that the GBC is going to control who and how the CPO restricts people. So they're going to have people like Keshava Bharati and Lokanath, and they'll be like, yeah, okay, let's we'll have the CPO review his case, and the review will be done by people that the GBC controls. That's ultimately what they're looking to do. And they want to just create an appearance of due process so that it looks legitimate. That's all they're interested in. They're not Go ahead, Damodar.
Sorry. They did something very similar, actually, with the CPO office in the US. They increased their funding, but actually they put in another competing leader without CPO's say-so.
Yeah.
So these do appear ways of undermining people in those offices that aren't subject to their dictations, that aren't subject to their control. They absolutely want outcomes that are convenient for the society, at least in their own twisted idea, meaning their friends. They're not at all interested in due process, or not at all interested in, what's fair and just. Now we do. Sorry, go ahead.
They've certainly demonstrated, beyond reasonable doubt, over the years, that child protection is not a priority. It's certainly not a priority when protecting the children conflicts with whatever other priorities they have for the GBC. My biggest concern would be if the GBC actually did give a robust funding to the Child Protection Office, and then they're saying, okay, we're going to hire a new director, we're going to pay his wage, and then all of a sudden you have a director that is whose livelihood depends on a paycheck that is signed by the GBC body, and then that's it. The whole thing is compromised. So in a way, the CPO needs more funding, but that would further compromise the autonomy of the Child Protection Office if you have a properly paid CPO director. But anyway, that's something.
Does this conclude our analysis of those GBC decisions? Saraswati,
Yes.
any final thoughts before we start looking at a few comments, and then we'll move on to some of our other topics?
Yeah, I remember when Sanaka was sharing documents from Anuradesha Vapu, formerly known as Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami's case. Those old documents, was it from the 90s?
They started from the 1990 till the 2000s, 2007, some of them as late as 2006.
Yeah, I remember one sannyasi guru, GBC member, in his correspondence, I think it was Bhakti Vaibhava Swami, but he was like, I don't like how you're treating Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami, so I don't think I'm going to follow through with my pledge for the ISKCON Child Protection Office. And you can see when leaders don't like how their child abuser friends are held accountable for their actions, they threaten to withhold funding. So those pledges, like you said, they mean nothing until we actually see it come through. So for them to put it in the GBC resolutions as if it's a guaranteed, it's not.
No, absolutely. Brahmatirtha told me personally that when the CPO found Lakshmani guilty, he withdrew his donations to the Child Protection Office. So it's kind of like, I'll give you money if you do what I want. If you don't do what you want, then I'm no longer interested in child protection. And yeah, it's a way to control.
Yeah. Let's have a look at some of these comments, and then we will progress to related topics. So Anjali has been quite prolific in her comments. So yeah, a dozen good reasons why it's not taken to the police. A lot of evidence. So this thing about evidence, it's not that we're lowering the threshold just to go after abusers. It's the ability to prove these things is challenging. And we do have a priority to keep children safe. It's not like we're dishing out custodial sentences. At most, a CPO restriction is, don't give class, don't lead kirtan, maybe we need to keep you away from children. Okay, people may feel that their reputation is damaged. Actually, half the time, no one even knows that they were found guilty. And this is one of the weaknesses, because the CPO, their findings are not something that has a legally recognized basis. There's a risk that if the CPO says, yes, we found this person guilty and broadcast it, that they're then open to defamation suits. We saw a defamation suit on something that was clearly established, just because that would be the tendency of a person found guilty. They will try and exploit any weakness and bash the advocates into submission. Any further comments on Anjali's statement there?
It's easier to speak about specific cases because each case is unique. So for when the CPO works on the preponderance of evidence, so let's look at Keshava Bharati's recent case. We have the CPO had a statement from the victim to work with, and they also had a confession from Keshava Bharati. So, and then Keshava Bharati also, after writing his confession, he wrote something and he said, well, no, actually I wasn't well, I didn't really mean that confession. So what the CPO judges, their job is to look at all the evidence available and say, does it look like we have 51% probability that the Keshav Bharati is responsible for this? And they concluded that they looked at all the evidence and they concluded that yes, it does look like we have at least 51%. We have a statement from the victim, we have a confession from the perpetrator. And then we also have, he took back the confession, but it looks like we have at least 51%. We're going to restrict his privileges. So now it's important to understand that the CPO doesn't have the same requirement of threshold for evidence of a criminal court, but it also doesn't, as Damodar was saying, it also doesn't give out the same punishments. So if Keshav Bharati had been taken to the police, he would have done jail time for abusing a minor. Now, the CPO can't do that. All they're saying is you can't be a guru, you can't be a sannyasi, chant your japa in a corner, you can't be an authority. We don't, as a spiritual society, we don't want somebody who has abused children to be a spiritual authority. That would be counterproductive for anybody. And that's all there is to it. So and the same happened with Lakshmi Moni. They look at her case and they said, yes, we think there is at least 51% chance that she is guilty. So more likely than not, it looks like she is responsible. From the evidence we've seen, this was our conclusion. And then there was a host of supporters, friends, sympathizers who, without seeing any of the evidence, without understanding what is the standard by which the CPO works, they said, oh, the CPO doesn't follow proper procedure. They don't, they were out to get her. They were in a witch hunt and did all these things without, but if you look at the substance of their complaints, there is none. There is no substance to their complaints. There is like, they're just making a lot of noise. They've caused a lot of disturbance. They've caused a huge disservice to child protection in ISKCON, all because they just can't accept that their friend has done horrible things to children. And that's incredibly unfortunate.
Saraswati, any thoughts on that before we move on?
Yeah, everyone who's defended Lakshmi Moni has said, I knew her, I spent time with her in person, and I never saw her abuse children. And I've heard that said with other abusers as well. I know them. I don't know them like that, like they would abuse children. I never saw them abuse children. But a child abuser can look like anyone. They can act like anyone. And like very often, they keep their abusive practices secretive because they know that it's like society will see it as wrong.
And of course, we will be looking at some of the attempts by leaders to actively intercede. So yeah, it's kind of scary. It's not even that they go, oh, I have a hard time believing this personally. They actively campaign and discredit and spread disinformation about CPO. So that's way beyond just cognitive dissonance. They say with certainty, these CPO people are badly motivated. These advocates of child protection are badly motivated. As you say, they use terms like witch hunt. Well, let's face it, a witch is a supernatural being. People can debate whether or not Vedic descriptions of pisachas are real and that kind of stuff. But we know that witch trials were this discredited phenomena where just about any woman who might happen to have been a herbal medical practitioner might have been burned at the stake without due process. They're comparing CPO investigations to some kind of moral panic that happened in the Middle Ages. This is pretty rotten. I so believe in my friend that I'm prepared to go to any length to defend them. Wow. Sanaka, you look like you're about to say, oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I think the term witch hunt is applied more to us than the actual CPO office. But in response to that, if anyone thinks I'm doing a witch hunt, I just see people who are afraid to speak up. I see this need in our society, a society that I care about, for change, for justice. And to anyone out there who would like to see justice, I have advocated and represented victims in cases for the CPO, and I would be happy to help you walk through the process, because I have read the CPO policies. I can advocate for you, and just please contact me if you're interested.
Thanks, Saraswati. Maybe we'll do the rest of the comments later, and we'll start looking at some of these campaigns by various leaders. Now, I've mentioned a few already. We had Bhakti Vikash Maharaj's video recently that got withdrawn, but not before it had been seen and by a lot of people, and was quite shocking in nature. It's not the first time that he has come to the side of an accused abuser, and absolutely tried to rebut the legitimacy of any concerns. We've had Shivaram Swami's internal letter to the GBC. We had Jayadvaita Swami's letter to the CPO. We even had Sharanagati's public, discrediting of CPO and campaigners. Interesting, in just about all of those cases, they seem to make the spurious argument, oh, well, I shouldn't have to defend these comments because you were never meant to read them. In other words, I prefer to do my subterfuge in the shadows, and I feel a little, aggrieved that it's come out into the open. So do we have a preference in terms of starting with any of those? I've got the relevant letters all queued up here.
Maybe I don't know, Bhakti Vikash Swami?
Yeah, let's maybe start with Bhakti Vikash Swami. So again, he made reference at the beginning of that video that has now been withdrawn, that he was being asked to clarify his position. Presumably these were challenges you had issued, Sanaka, as he said, when Kripakara was spotted in the Salem community. And very interesting, I'll just read a couple of choice passages from things that he said. There's a lot of straw man arguments here. So first one, I want to draw a distinction between child abusers and ex-child abusers. It seems to be presumed that anyone who has abused children must be evil and cannot possibly participate or cannot, be a devotee of any kind. And surely a devotee cannot do such horrible things. Now, maybe some people take away their devotee status, but I don't think most people are arguing that that they've completely lost all adhikar as a devotee. We're actually arguing that they simply face the consequences for their actions. I'm particularly concerned about him deciding that someone is an ex-abuser. How is he verifying that they're an ex-abuser? He came to the defense of Bhaktivinoda Anidesh Vapu, and it was subsequently revealed that there was a whole bunch of things, still going on. How has he verified that Kripakara is an ex-abuser?
The interesting thing.
Let me just finish this thought.
Yeah.
So there he is running a school, clearly is not doing background checks. If it was news to him that Kripakara had a history, and he's actually more upset that someone's calling him out than he is about, oh, I've actually allowed access of this convicted abuser to children. That's a real worry. Sorry, Sanaka, please continue.
No, it's mind-blowing. I'm going to use the word ignorance that there is surrounding.
Can you hold your mic up?
It's incredible to see the ignorance that there is surrounding this, the topic of child abuse. If somebody is so lost, confused, degraded, whatever adjective you want to use, that he is willing to destroy the life of a child to get some fleeting, not just destroy the life of the child, destroy his own life, his own soul, his own spiritual life, to get some fleeting sense gratification. If somebody is willing to go that far, somebody's that lost, how can you, it's like you cannot take that person has serious problems. You cannot take whatever that person says at face value. You can't assume that they're going to be somehow forthcoming and say, well, yes, I still have, this is something I still struggle with, actually. It's like that's an incredibly self-absorbed, narcissistic person with a serious disturbance. And nobody said Kripakara or Bhaktividya Purana, they can't chant Hare Krishna, they're not devotees. What was said is, the questions that were asked were, why are known child abusers allowed to be around children? Why are you letting Kripakara, why are you bringing him to speak to the children in your school? He's a convicted sex offender. That's completely reckless. The assumption that he is an ex, I mean, what the hell is an ex-child abuser? It's like saying an ex-murderer. Now he's no longer a murderer. It's absurd.
He hasn't murdered anyone today.
Yeah, no, he hasn't. But speaking of Kripakara, he's actually a repeat offender. It's not that he just offended once; he's offended on multiple occasions. So you have somebody who is actually a repeat offender, and somehow Bhakti Vikash assumes that he's an ex-child abuser. So therefore, it's safe to. He's risking the safety of the children in his school. That tells me that there's something wrong with certainly with how he looks at the world and the children in his school.
They seem to want to virtue signal about how deep their faith is in Apichet Sudaracharo. They literally use the same logic often. Don't these people accusing them believe in Krishna's words? I believe in Krishna's words, and I'm prepared to give them a free pass. What? Crazy nonsense. Saraswati?
I might have to go when my kids come home, or maybe I can go in the other room. Just want to say that.
For sure.
I might read a little bit more from the message. We live in a bad world. The whole society around us is abusive of children. If we see how many children grow up taking drugs from a young age, having sex at a young age, are suicidal and criminal. There are rampant kinds of child abuse which are just considered normal in so-called civilized society. No one makes a fuss. Contraception, abortion, divorce, especially in the presence of young children, fighting between parents in the presence of young children. It may be that those who are so much against, we should be against child abuse, but those who are so vocal about it don't see that there are much broader parameters of child abuse. Yeah, be vocal about it, try to stop it, but try and keep a balanced perspective. So this is quite extraordinary, really, this kind of logic. Perhaps the emphasis was my own, but that's the plain reading of the meaning that's being expressed. Strange false equivalent. You people who are banging on about child abuse and yet don't take issue with people getting divorced, you must be hypocrites with double standards. What do we say to logic and rhetoric like this?
Well, I acknowledge that there can be harmful things to children outside of, child sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. Like, there can be other factors that children witness that can harm them. But why is Bhakti Vikash Swami saying that, like, these things are harmful to children, but then I can have Kripakara, a serial child molester, come and be regarded as a leader in my ISKCON temple in Salem, South India? Like, why one but not the other?
It's a deflection, isn't it? It's like, I've been asked to please explain, and I'm going to try and switch the tables and put the CPO and the child protection advocates on trial.
It was like, I'm going to explain, and I'm going to give a message that is more confusing than I'm going to confuse things even more than they were before I tried to explain. In his video, he talks about Madhudvisa, who had a fall down with as a sannyasi. He had an illicit relationship with a woman who happened to be. It was a consensual. She was a willing woman. She was attracted to him, and it was obviously was not within marriage, so it was illicit sex. But to try somehow and compare that to the sexual assault of a devotee child and then use Apiched Sudaracharo to say, well, Prabhupada forgave Madhudvisa, we should forgive child abusers because it's the same thing. It's what he is saying is that it's illicit sex. That's what it is. It's a fall down. So Madhudvisa had a fall down with an adult consensual woman, and this guy had a fall down with a child. It's not a fall down. It's assault. If it's assault, it's not consensual. If it's to a child, you've destroyed their life. If it's a Vaishnava child, you've committed the worst possible Vaishnava aparad. And nowhere in the Shastra it says that you can chant away those kind of offenses. Even if you look at the story of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni, the offense was verbal, and it was significantly less severe than the sexual assault of a child. And still, Lord Narayan himself said, I cannot help you. There's nothing I can do to help you. You got to go and beg for the forgiveness. And somehow Bhakti Vikash forgets that. That's
the worst aspect, I believe. Sorry, please finish.
No, I'm done.
The worst aspect of that Madhudvish anecdote, I think, is he was trying to make the argument that Prabhupada would like things hushed up. So he really stressed that Prabhupada was upset with Pushpa Krishna for revealing, Madhudvish had these difficulties.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be part of his line of reasoning that A, abusers should be kept in position. We should keep faith with them and give them another chance. And B, it should never be known publicly. As you say, there's real false equivalence here between a consensual sexual relationship and someone who represents a risk to children, someone who has harmed children. I suspect that Madhudvisha's willing partner did not need lifelong therapy to recover from that sexual relationship. So yes, we don't want to broadcast someone's difficulties. That's a very different thing than keeping children safe and making sure there's proper investigations and proper safeguards. So we really have a very disingenuous kind of argument being used. Saraswati?
Oh no, I'm here. I just heard an echo, but it might just be on my side.
It's clear on my side.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also hearing you fine. I might go on then with some of the other messaging.
I just wanted to say one thing. There's about these leaders that defend child abusers. And this has been going on since the time of Damodar and with everybody. It's like but they make this false equivalent, which there's a series of them compounded, which is sometimes victims are pressured to forgive because devotees forgive, so why are you not forgiving? And then they say once, or maybe they will say even, well, the guy's apologized. Why is he's offered an apology? Why are you not forgiving? As if forgiveness is something that should be demanded and imposed. You have to forgive. That's not forgiveness. But then they equate forgiveness with, therefore he should be reinstated to the highest possible social, spiritual position. We should let him continue being a guru because he's been forgiven either by the victim or he's been forgiven because Apiched Sudaracharo Krishna says that they are devotees. Therefore, Bhakti Vikas Swami says, these guys, they just don't want them anywhere. That's not true. Nobody would object if Kripakara, Damodar, Bhaktivi, Vidyapurna, and everybody, they say, hey, we're terribly sorry. We've destroyed the lives. It's horrendous what we've done. We would like a small opportunity to serve somewhere. Can we wash the pots in some temple where there are no children? Can we plow the field somewhere? Can we just have the association of some devotees, hoping that in this life we'll be able to at least purify our consciousness a little bit? Nobody would object to that. But ISKCON's child abusers, they all want the limelight. They want power, prestige. They want significance. They want the Vyasa-san. They want they want authority. That's what they're after, and that's against all the. Those are all obstacles for bhakti and devotion.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we see. We see that they have lots of sympathy for this fallen comrade. Not one thought. There was not one thought in that message about the impacts of abuse on victims. It was all, poor old so-and-so, give him another chance. Let's not crucify the poor fellow. I'll read a little bit more here. Maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not up to us to forgive. They didn't abuse us. Like, they have to beg forgiveness from those that they harm.
Absolutely right. Here's another little passage. It may be that the devotee has some demoniac tendencies as they take to Krishna consciousness. Seriously, after doing so much, they succumb to some really very, very bad anarthas. That's apparently how we're characterizing abuse. Yet they're still trying to be devotees. There, but for the grace of God go I. And that's the saying. And I can't say I'm categorically better than an abuser. So again, I think this is virtue signaling, because really what they're saying is anyone who does then condemn abuse, well, they're making some kind of claim about being better than this person. So it's a real worry that this is, let's face it, this is what's being taught from Vyasa sounds.
The paradox of all this, I don't even know what to call this phenomena, is that they are not even acting in the best interest of these perpetrators, because they are, how do you say, they're not helping them. They're not encouraging them to apologize. They're not encouraging them to actually seek redemption for what they've done, to understand the gravity of what they're done. They're saying, no, it's okay. What you've done is not a big deal. That wasn't a big problem. It wasn't a big problem for you. It doesn't matter how it's affected the victims, and it doesn't matter how it's affected society. It's not a big deal. So they are actually doing a disservice to the perpetrator. They're certainly doing a disservice to the victim, and they're doing a disservice to society at large. It's completely, it's so ignorant. It's just like mind-boggling.
So maybe we can move on from Bhakti Vikash Maharaj's video message. Look at, I've got here Jayadvaita Swami's message. So he wrote this directly to the CPO. Again, I'll just read a couple of passages. I'm writing to you regarding one aspect of the CPO's decision in the case of Keshava Bharati Das Goswami. I here leave aside various features I regard as ill-considered, reckless, pseudo-judicial, and otherwise outrageous, and focus on one paragraph. The panel, so he's now quoting the CPO report. The panel would also like to highlight that many of Keshava Bharati's godbrothers and other senior devotees wrote character references for him, some even claiming that he could have never carried out any child abuse. This goes to show that the culture of defending and protecting one's friends still exists in our society. And unless leaders receive training and have an understanding of child abuse, they'll continue to blindly support, protect, and defend those who have had serious allegations made against them. It should be mandatory for all GBC and leaders to have ongoing child protection training. Now, Jayadvaita Swami then seems to take issue just that CPO would dare to make such an egregious statement. You didn't have to say that. Instead of using a supposed judicial decision as a soapbox for your views on ISKCON leaders, you could have devoted the space to answering questions directly like, was there anyone who corroborated the professed victim's testimony? Was the professed victim asked to undergo a psychological review to help assess the reliability of her testimony? And if not, why not? So, I mean, there's more in that, but I'll pause here to see if either of you would like to comment on these attempts to directly, I guess, insult and gaslight the CPO.
Yeah, was Keshava Bharati asked to undergo psychological testing after he spent Sankirtan money for years on prostitutes and then was reinstated as a sannyasi and guru? Like, at any point did Jayadvaita Swami say, oh, maybe Keshava Bharati should undergo psychological evaluation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's almost amusing to read that part of the paragraph, because Jayadvaita Swami takes issue with the observation from the CPO judges that ISKCON leaders blindly supported Keshava Bharati. So you read Jayadvaita Swami's letter, and it's obvious that Jayadvaita Swami was aware of the existence of Keshava Bharati's confession letter. So Jayadvaita Swami knows that Keshava Bharati wrote the confession. Still, he went ahead and supported Keshava Bharati, even though he's confessed to. He knows that he has confessed to abusing a child. That's the very definition of blind support. And then he's saying, "Oh, how can you say that we're blind? That's so offensive that you say that we're blindly supporting our friends." Like, well, that's exactly what you did. You knew that he had confessed to the crime, and you went ahead and defended him. Well, I mean, it's like, I rest my case. You've already answered yourself.
Yeah, he spent most of the letter saying, I'm so offended, and I'm offended for my friends who also supported Keshava Bharati. Yeah, we know he confessed to child abuse, but we're still supporting him, and we're offended that you are questioning our support for him.
And the most perhaps disturbing part about his whole letter is the fact that it's not just him, it's him, Hridayananda, Shivaram, Bhaktivikas Swami. It's present in all of their interventions. There is zero concern given for the victims. They're so concerned about the welfare of the perpetrators. And what is the message that they're giving out? The message they're giving out is that they regard the welfare, the interests, the well-being of child sexual abusers to be more important and higher than that of their victims. What the message they're giving out is that in ISKCON, we're soft on child abusers, and that we treat them well and we protect them, and that our children are not valued. That is the message they're giving out, and that's deeply problematic.
Well, you mentioned Shiva Ram Swami. Here's some excerpts from his. So he's writing to the GBC body. I did reach out to him to discuss it, and he said, well, since I was never meant to see it, he preferred not to engage.
Oh, that was he said that to you privately?
Yeah.
Okay.
As a member of ISKCON who was involved in its leadership management for almost 50 years, I raised to you my concern, the legitimacy of the current Child Protection Office and its officers. I requested the same over a year ago. I appealed to you to organize an independent investigation of the ICPO with the intent of determining whether the allegations made by both members of ISKCON and accused abusers is valid or not. Furthermore, until the completion of an ICPO investigation, I request that you suspend the decisions on 3 cases mentioned below and others with similar questionable procedure. Somehow, by Krishna's arrangement, I've become familiar with Sri Radhe's, Lakshmi Moni's, and Keshava Bharati's cases. Last year, about this time, I made my feelings about Sri Radhe's case and my lack of faith in the current ICPO, as well as in the GBC's supervision of the ICPO as a body meant to actually deliver justice to ISKCON members. Just a little further here. To make a long story short, I lay my case before you. Attached, you will find a short report from Sharanagati, so we might look at that in a second, sent to the GBC EC some 5 months back. Her critique of the flaws and apparent injustice of the ICPO's handling Lakshmi Moni's case are not identical, but very similar to the flaws in Keshava Bharati and Sri Radhe's cases, and who knows which others. My point to the receivers is this. Will you allow injustices resulting in the destruction of senior members' lives take place before your very eyes just because you don't want to interfere in ICPO cases or because you are afraid to speak against a vocal, abusive minority, only interested in acting on allegations and not a comprehensive procedure of objective justice? Wow. Comments, thoughts?
Has he ever intervened on behalf of a victim, or is it always because his child abuser friends are getting persecuted?
Yeah, I don't have knowledge of that. I do feel very much for Sanaka in particular, his disciple, who appears to be cast here as someone who's a vocal abusive minority, or maybe that's us. I don't know.
I mean, he definitely charged the CPO with being unjust. The interesting thing about Shivaram Swami's letter is that he demands, first of all, he opens his letter with, I think in the subject, it says strictly confidential, do not share. So he demands strict confidentiality for his support of child abusers, confirmed child abusers. And then he's requesting that the GBC runs a public inquiry of the Child Protection Office. And to me, when I look at that, the only thing I can think of, wow, this is really, really incredibly. I don't want to use cowardly for sure, but it's also vicious. It's like, wow, like what planet do you live on? And this is coming from somebody who was sitting on the GBC in 1990. When the GBC first became aware that Bhaktividyapurna was brutalizing children in the school. And so he's got blood in his hands for defending Bhaktividyapurna for years, for honoring him. He was inviting him to Hungary and giving him foot washes and all these things. He was inviting a known child abuser into his temple and getting his disciples to wash his feet. And to me, it's like, what is wrong? Like, what planet do you live on? And I wonder if it's a generational thing. Is it like something to do with boomers that they just cannot understand child abuse? I don't, no idea what it is, but there is a huge generational problem. Seems that within the Prabhupada disciple generation devotees, there is a large number of supporter of child abusers, and there is the numbers of people who understand how serious the situation is. They're so few and far between, and they don't really speak out. They're very silent. So it's almost as if, okay, you understand the problem, but you're not saying anything. You're, in a way, with your silence, you are facilitating you're facilitating the problem. You understand what the problem is, but you don't speak out.
Yeah, with the older devotees, like the Prabhupada disciple generation, so many of them have left over child abuse, so they're not even around. Is it echoey?
I can't hear an echo.
Okay. I don't hear an echo.
So many of them are just not around to say anything. And the ones who do feel strongly about child protection, I've spoken with some of them, and they're just so fried out because their own children were abused, and it's so hard for them to talk about it that they don't even want to spend the time to invest. And I do want to say that there are some ISKCON leaders and there are some older generation devotees who are still active who do care about child protection. And I think all three of us have spoken with those devotees publicly and privately, and we can appreciate them.
I mean, one of the evidences that Shivaram Swami cites here is Sharanagati's appeal. So Sharanagati decided to go public. She was a student of Lakshmi Moni, felt, I guess, cognitive dissonance. No, this can't have happened. And she says that she offered to help her in an appeal case based on what she calls the absurdity of the claims. But Lakshmi Moni decided not to do the appeal. Now, you know, it's described here that it was just all too much, but it could also be argued, well, if you actually feel like, you know, you've actually had a miscarriage of justice, then it's one thing to say, I appealed it and I was successful in getting it turned over. It's another thing to say, I could have appealed it, I didn't, but let me tell you, it's all false. I mean, it's a very unusual way of operating. Now, there's several things that Sharanagati, who has no particular expertise in child protection, or it's unclear. She talks of having researched the case, but she's very economic, let's say, in the facts that she presents. So she talks about revolving case managers. Leela Sukha, so that's the head of CPO in the US, was appointed as case manager January 2016, but was removed 2 months later in March due to bias and altering witness testimony to make it sound worse than it was. So I don't know, why Leela Sukha was, but that's obviously dishing the dirt on Leela Sukha. She then goes on to say the case was then handed over to Radhadasi, and she was removed. Now, Radhadasi was removed for tampering with witness testimony and making it, trying to deter witness reporting. She was also a close friend, so there was also bias. Of course, no comment about that bias is mentioned here. I'll pause just to see if either of you have any comments just on that first argument, or Sharanagati's argument generally.
Do you want to go, Saraswati, or should I go?
Go ahead, because I just drew a blank. I forgot what Damodar just said.
I mean, reading, to be honest, there are a number of points that Lakshmani supporters keep bringing up. And it's like listening to a broken record. And when you analyze each of their objections, you see that none of them hold water. None of them have any substance. None of them you can look at and objectively say, oh, wow, that's a valid point. There was a problem there, if you understand the full background of the situation. So then they throw things around like, oh, the evidence was insufficient. Okay, the evidence was insufficient by what standard? And this was something that was started by the lawyers in her defense. And it's like, yes, if you took Lakshmani's case to a criminal court of justice, the evidence would most likely be deemed insufficient to secure a criminal conviction. But that's not
on the basis of no reasonable doubt, not on the basis of preponderance of evidence.
Beyond reasonable doubt, we don't have enough to secure a conviction beyond reasonable doubt. And that's what they're trying to do. That's also, as a side issue, that's also what the India CPO wants to do. The India CPO wants to just let the police handle all the CPO cases in investigations. The police says that there's no case, then they say, well, the police said there's no case. Why should we do better than the police? Which is a very disingenuous way of handling child abuse. It's going to be a disaster, because then the cases that will actually be convicted in India, it's going to be extremely low, which means we're going to have a huge number of incidents, a minimal number of convictions. So then GBC will be able to say, look, India now no longer has child abuse problems because the police says so. But there is a huge number of problems that the police will not address, incidents that the police say, well, we can't do that. So from that perspective, you can make the statement that the evidence was insufficient. But from the CPO, from the way, and by the way, the GBC has ratified the CPO manual. So it's not that the CPO woke up one day and said, well, this is how we're going to work. The CPO agreed. The CPO works on rules that the GBC have agreed to. And that's been since the inception of the CPO. Nothing has changed. Nothing changed for Lakshmani's case. There was nothing different about how Lakshmani's case was handled and how every other case was handled. And then you have people like Hridayananda Maharaj. He praises the CPO for the way they handled Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami's case, because he didn't like Bhaktivedanta Purna. But they used the same exact parameters, and they were the exact same people, people running the CPO, who supposedly did a travesty of justice because they found his friend guilty. It's just completely ludicrous. And I mean, if you read Sharanagati's letter, it's one cognitive, no, it's not cognitive, one logical fallacy after the other. It's just like, yeah, there's really nothing to it.
Well, and it's also broadcasting the disinformation. So, second argument, questionable review panel. She quotes the CPO guidelines about the panel having outstanding integrity and good judgment, and then she passes on some hearsay about supposedly one of the judges, and then she talks about, or a review panelist, and then she talks about another review panelist. Dakshina is a close friend of the case manager Gandharvika, leaving plenty of room for bias, as if somehow or other the very fact that they know each other means that Gandharvika's prejudices against Lakshmi Muni will not be contested by this other review panel. I mean, it's literally just begging the question, I think it's called. Saraswati, anything to add on some of these points?
I did want to say something about Sharanagati wanting to keep her letter a secret, along with Shiva Ramaswamy wanting to keep his letter a secret. If they're not ashamed or embarrassed about what they're saying, why not let it be public? We're speaking publicly because we back what we say. Why are they hiding in the dark corners saying this? Like, what's wrong with what they're saying that they have to hide it?
Yeah, good point. I mean, I wanted to bring out some of these because it just evidences how committed the campaign is against CPO. And clearly, these kind of objections and this disinformation is garnering favor with leaders. And we're in that risky situation now where having made some headway possibly with a really capable CPO, we might now be reverting back to a CPO that takes its dictation from the GBC, and they're making their colors really clear here that they're okay with some people being thrown under the bus, but there's others that will absolutely defend tooth and claw. Any other comments on this topic before perhaps we look at some of the comments that we have?
I'd love to see the comments because I can't see from.
Yeah, I'll flash them up. I just wanted to make sure that we were complete on this. Sanaka, you're muted.
I want to say one more thing about Lakshmi Moni. One of the core arguments that Lakshmi Moni supporters make is that Akuti, Mother Akuti, who was somebody with a devotee, Prabhupada disciple, who was a teacher with Lakshmi Moni for many years, she was the student that one of the students that claims to have been sexually abused by Lakshmi Moni. She claims that Akuti was present in the room when it happened. And so they say, well, the CPO did not interview Mother Akuti. That is evidence of malpractice, that it was the case was mishandled. Now, the thing is that Akuti made a statement. She wrote a statement which is part of Lakshmi Moni's defense. It was submitted as part of Lakshmi Moni's defense. In this statement, Akuti says that she never witnessed any child abuse. Now, I haven't talked to Akuti, but I can tell you that if they did interview Akuti, I can tell you exactly what she would say. She would say, no, I did not see it. So to me, when you have the statement from Akuti saying, I didn't see anything, to come and somehow say that this is such a, what's the word, travesty of justice, the fact that Akuti was not interviewed, it's like, why would you go and interview Akuti when she has already made her position clear? What would it add to go and speak to Akuti and say, did you see this? That somehow they think that if they had interviewed Akuti and she had said for the second time, I did not see that, somehow that would have changed the outcome of the case for Lakshmi Moni. They somehow believe this fantasy, which is like, to me, it makes no sense whatsoever. She has made a statement. Her position has been clear, and it was entered, and it was considered by the judges. Where is the problem? But they make a huge deal out of it. Anyway, that's.
Well, they're clutching at straws, anything to kind of discredit the outcome, and they're trying to apply courtroom procedure. Why wasn't she cross-examined?
Yeah.
Okay. The statement was made, a statement was considered, and preponderance of evidence, we arrived at such and such a conclusion. So
we don't like the conclusion.
I'm not sure that we'd ever have a basis on which. This is exactly why they would never have been found as jurors in such a case, because they couldn't be free from bias. They're not acknowledging their own bias. They're just trying to put all the bias onto the CPO.
Yeah.
And they're publicly discrediting. Saraswati, we're about to look at the comments, but any final thoughts before we do that?
Well, I can acknowledge that Sharanagati had a good experience with Lakshmimoni. When I was in Lakshmimoni's school, I could see how some girls may have come away with positive experiences, and some did not come away with positive experiences. So just because Sharanagati had a good experience with Lakshmimoni, and that's great, it doesn't mean that these girls, many of them, especially the beginning years, had very traumatic experiences with her. Like, just because there was like some good experiences, some girls, doesn't mean that some girls had different experiences. Both can happen.
It's a well-documented thing, right? It's called the halo effect. So if I've decided somebody's a good person, that will bias my reading of everything else that happens. It's a worry that people can't even suspend or acknowledge their own bias and suspend their disbelief. And they're quite comfortable going on the attack. Oh, these people saying these things were malicious. The CPO were malicious. They're on a witch hunt. It's not like they go, oh, okay, wow, I never saw that one coming. They actively canvass on behalf of their fallen comrades. Now, there are other topics, and I suspect it may go beyond the time limits that we reasonably have for this. We've got ISKCON Mayapur and the upholding of the Mayapur Executive Board of restrictions against Madhav Garanga and Sri Radhe. That will be a topic for a future discussion. I think we mentioned ISKCON Vrindavan may also be, plenty of cause for concerns there. But in the interest of time, unless you guys fight me for this, I will start.
Just one last thing.
Yeah.
The only honest and accurate statement that Sharanagati can make is, I did not witness any abuse. I was not abused. I didn't witness any abuse. Mm-hmm. That's the only, that's it. The moment she says, therefore, those who are claiming to have been abused must be lying, that's there's no way she can defend that claim. And not only is there no way that she can defend that claim, she's adding insult to injury to Lakshmimoni's victims. She said, I didn't see it, therefore it didn't happen. I mean, that's insane. It's nuts. And if you look at every abuser in history, at least in ISKCON's history, they have a list of people who like them, and they may be students. Damodar was walking around with a dossier of letters from students that liked him. Does that mean that he didn't abuse you? Of course not. It just means that he didn't abuse every student. He was nice to some students. Some students liked him. That doesn't mean anything. That's why there is an importance difference that Sharanagati doesn't understand between a character statement and a character reference and a witness statement. They're two completely different things.
Well, let's face it, not only do they not wear some kind of T-shirt outing themselves as an abuser, but most of them are quite expert at grooming. Now, I'm not saying that in relation to Lakshmimoni, we're just making a general principle here, that often abusers want to carry out their dastardly deeds in the dark, away from the public eye. That's a vital component of their strategy. And in order to gain trust, they're often very good at inveigling themselves into others' trust.
Mhm.
Again, not saying this about her in particular, but just about the phenomenon in general.
If you look at Bhakti Vidyapurna, he had a whole long list of former students that loved him. Okay, that it's nice that he was nice to them. I'm glad for them. That doesn't mean that it has no relevance when you're talking about the abuse that he did perpetrate. And it
Well, this
certainly
is what-
doesn't discredit his victims.
And this is what was so outrageous about some of the claims that were made in the wake of his, the extent of his scandal really going public. I didn't know. He seemed like such a nice guy. How could we have possibly known? Well, you could have read the 8 reports that were sent out about what he'd done. I mean, we saw Bhakti Vikash actively defending him. Why are people having a go at Bhakti Vidyapurna? This was earlier. After all he's done for the Vedic educational system and so on. In other words, I'm prepared to let a few, slip-ups go, because I think overall he's got so much to offer. He should be given a chance. Shouldn't allow all these people to badmouth and detract from great devotees. It's very worrying rhetoric, and it's the kind of rhetoric that impedes us eradicating abuse from the society. All right, let's have a little walk through some of these comments. As I mentioned, Anjali had been especially prolific. There's a dozen good reasons why it's not taken to the police. Criminal cases need a lot of evidence. I think we might have done that one already. Here's the next one. Prisons have the phrase, we take out our own trash. The most people most likely to be killed in prisons, other than former police, are pedophiles. Beyond these statements in the CPO guidelines, what more can we do? It's a worry that so many of the GBCs just say, I don't have time for this. In fact, we find a lot of our emails to them just get bounced back, like we've been put on some banned receiver list, and they just don't want to know about these things. Like they've just decided, we're malcontents who've got no legitimacy. What do we make of this? Why is it seemingly so difficult for apparently a group of spiritually evolved leaders to want to actually look at this, to want to tackle it?
Anjali's making a good point. She's saying in prisons there's a lot less tolerance for child abusers than we have in the GBCs and amongst the ISKCON devotees. So it's a really powerful and important question. Why is it that our senior leaders have a higher tolerance to child abuse than common criminals? Not just any common criminals, the worst of the common criminals. It's like it's mind-boggling. It's incredible that in prison they understand that child abuse is bad. ISKCON, so-called, whatever, pure devotees, whatever you want to call them, however advanced they are, they don't understand. It's like, how is that possible?
Saraswati?
Could I see her comment again?
Yeah, sorry, I'll put it back up.
So what can we do proactively beyond the 2 pages of the CPO guidelines? I guess she means the 2 pages that I referred to about going to law enforcement. I mean, just do what you can. And there's different things you can do. Like, we speak publicly, we support each other in the Vedic Inquirer group. We're talking here right now. But other things you can do are, if you're involved in your ISKCON community, if you're not involved, you can start getting involved. If there's not a child protection team, you can start one. If there is a child protection team, you can ask to join it and make sure guidelines are being followed. Like, children under 12 are being supervised by adults, and there's signs posted around the temple. You have regular meetings. The members of the community know what to do if they witness child abuse, or if they hear a victim come to them. Like, there's different things you can do. You can write letters to your leaders. You can take CPO training. You can, Shama Mohini in Phoenix, Arizona, she does amazing things. She invites the local police to speak to her community and the children 4 times a year. So they have a relationship with the police already. And she engages the children in service, like leading kirtan, doing puja, giving class. And all these are amazing things. And there might be other things that I haven't mentioned that can also be done.
There's perhaps a little bit of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sanaka.
I think in short, what the only thing that we really can do is change ourselves, and that's, it's a cliche, but it's hard enough. It is hard to change our perspective. And what do I mean by change? I mean that because most people, if you ask them, they will say, I very much support child protection, until it comes at a cost for them. When somebody they like, their guru, their favorite swami, is being scrutinized or behaves in a way that is detrimental to child protection and sets a precedent or pushes a cultural idea that is dangerous to child protection, then all of a sudden you hear justifications, you hear cognitive dissonance, intelligence goes out the window. So what can I do? I can observe myself. If I can change myself, the world is a different place, because I am part of the human race. And if my consciousness change, if I am more, like Srila Prabhupada talks about the science of self-realization, if I become more aware of who I am, what my motives are, what the consequences of my words, my actions are, then the environment around me is different, because I am part of the environment. When you change one component of that environment, if you're in your community or temple, if your consciousness changes, that community is no longer the same, because you're going to affect the entire community. So that is it's small, but it's the change that we can do, and it's incredibly powerful and effective.
It's like that motto, be the change that you want to see in the world.
Yes.
I get a sense there was a little bit of rhetoric in the question here. So what can we be able to do whilst GPCs, e.g. Madhuri don't afford it any attention? I think we've always been realistic that we are obviously trying to get a change of heart and a change of mind in the leadership, but it's not like everything's lost if we can't. In fact, the fact that they choose to circle the wagons rather than take these concerns seriously is probably quite predictable. One thing I think we have done by creating such much greater awareness is they can no longer ignore it. So even though they might be having their defensive reflexes, the fact is it's on their agenda, and they know they're under scrutiny, and they know that the community is becoming more and more intolerant of their intransigence or even their collusion. But I think in creating awareness, we might in many ways expect more from subsequent generations who've been a part of these conversations than the current leadership, who does seem much more inclined to defend their own and see this as some kind of unwarranted attack. So that's there. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the others. Just a little aside that I mentioned. Yeah, I mean, I think you were talking earlier, Sanaka, that you'd love to get a Nutama on along with Kamlesh Krishna. And we have reached out on a few occasions to GBC leaders and so on, and for some inexplicable reason, they just don't want to participate in these conversations. Now, this is a reasonable question coming up from, I'm not sure of his devotee name, Francisco Romano. Forgive me for asking, but I would like to know what you would like to achieve. What are you aiming to get to? Are you still interested in working for change and betterment of the ISKCON institution? Who would like to tackle that?
I think his name is Praladanath or something like that. I think he's from
Praladanath, okay.
What is the objective? Are you still interested in working for...
You're a bit faint again.
Of the ISKCON institution. For me, I have a very broad... I'm not interested in the institution. To me, ISKCON is like Srila Prabhupada, when he gave, there's so much in the acronym ISKCON. It's the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. To me, ISKCON is not a dead institution. To me, ISKCON is a society of devotees who are aspiring to become Krishna conscious, whether they are, the GBC approves of them, whether they identify as being part of the institution, whether they live in a piece of real estate that is registered to a society called ISKCON. To me, all of that is irrelevant. To me, ISKCON is anyone who is aspiring, is striving to become conscious of Krishna. So for me, that is very important. So changing the culture and the attitudes that are prevalent amongst many Gaudiya Vaishnava societies, followers of Srila Prabhupada, and people, Srila Prabhupada inspire people all over the world to take up Krishna consciousness. And there is a pervasive problem of tolerance for child abuse. It's like, it's not that the GBCs are the bad guys. It's a collective social problem. We all like the GBCs, in a way, they are tolerated by a society. It's not like the GBC. Everybody in Mayapur knew what Bhaktivedanta Purana was doing, and everybody thought, well, I've got another service. It's like everybody's complicit in a way. So my long-winded answer is, my objective is to try and change this culture of tolerance. If by the end of my life, this culture that is pervasive in Gaudiya Vaishnava societies around the world has changed, where there is less tolerance for child abuse, there is more awareness of the importance of serving these Vaishnava children, my life is successful. And whether it's the institution, whether it's outside the institute, to me, that's irrelevant. It's to me, it's not irrelevant. They're both important. To me, whether you choose to serve within the institution or you choose to serve outside the institution, either way, I would like you to value Vaishnava children more, to respect them and protect them, and to be more mindful of and take a very strong stance against those who abuse them.
Saraswati?
I like what Sanaka said earlier about, setting a good example, or like just change yourself first. And I think as a result, like if you walk your talk and you strive to be a good person, like people will want to be like you. You want to protect children, and you want to hold child abusers accountable for the atrocities they've committed. Other people will jump on board. They'll be like, oh yeah, now that you mention it, that sounds like a good cause. And then on a practical level, like just putting in the legwork, like writing letters and doing public campaigning, which, like when I started getting into this with Lokanath's case in April of 2021, working with you guys and KD and others, like behind the scenes, and getting mentorship, like all of this, I have learned so much. And what we have accomplished just in Lokanath's case, after 30 years of cover up and like corruption with that case, we managed to get him banned in ISKCON temples in North America and Europe. And so many people in the world in ISKCON societies are now aware of what he did, what the GBC did to cover it up, and how Lokanath has refused to step down and actually sue me and you, Damodar. Like, that's pretty low. So, I mean, just on a practical level, like I'd say that case alone, we've done good things. And then from there, I have helped some victims pursue cases with the ISKCON Child Protection Office and the ISKCON Leadership Misconduct Office, which I mentioned earlier was involved in ISKCON Guru, who was since removed. That's all.
Yeah, so in terms of, my motivations or my aims, first and foremost, it is about children being safe. This is a repository of so many Vaishnav children, and we should care about all children, but this is our immediate tribe. These are, our collective responsibility to make things safe for our next generation. So as long as children aren't safe in our society, that's already, an egregious oversight. That's an egregious problem. Every one of us should actually have that concern, to put that right. I also would like to see ISKCON come good. It was something that was started with great pains by Prabhupada, and this is one of the single most problematic things holding back its successful execution of its mission. So being able to get ISKCON's leaders to have healthy attitudes around child protection, that's a really noble cause. How far we'll get in this life? Yeah, that is questionable. But yes, the only reason we're making noise is to create awareness, is to get more people signing up to vigilance and protecting children, to get a better shout for children, and you know, to get leaders, either current or future, to revise their attitudes around this. All right, let's move along to some of the other questions. We've got Mitravinda, I think, Marion. I taught fourth grade in a lecture in the 90s. Lakshmi Mani brought a high school girl down to attend my class. It was demeaning for the girl and bad educational processes. She goes on to say, yep, Kripakara should not be around children. She adds to what we said earlier. No one minds if abusers live quietly and humbly somewhere safe to others. A cave, for example. Nice one. We've got Rati here. It's really hard to listen to a lot of the crap that people say. Parashuram jumping in with, yeah, they should never be in leadership positions, and contrasting the response of our leaders with how Ram demonstrated, you know, good response. Rati then saying, yeah, I've got to go, I've got to be somewhere else. I can't, this is hard to be, you know, around. Others talking about the boomer comments, the generational comments. Yeah, please don't blame all of us. Getting there. And here's another comment from Ashram Maharaj. Most of the disciples should have Prabhupada know so many boomers care deeply about child protection. Many of us have worked actively on behalf of children and other victims of abuse. And as Saraswati points out, many have left or are just exhausted by the apparent cover-ups, cronyism, gaslighting, etc. So I hope we can avoid overgeneralization. Yeah, there is always that risk of, you know, bemoaning the lack of commitment from leaders. Don't want to tarnish everybody. In fact, I do think that we're winning the war in general in terms of attitudes. Most devotees do have a zero tolerance aspect, and yet it's still sufficiently prevalent in the society that we're not about to ease up on the pressure. I'll pause just to see if you've got any comments on any of those thoughts that have been expressed.
No, I take it back. It was an unwarranted overgeneralization. There's definitely a high percentage of the boomer leaders in ISKCON who are either perpetrators themselves or covered up abuse or protected child abusers, but it's certainly not not everybody from that generation, for sure. Fortunately,
it was an era. I mean, as someone who just missed out on being a boomer and came in as Gen X, it was an era where there was less known. It wasn't discussed openly as we kind of grew up, and it's only really hit mainstream thought probably from the 80s and 90s onwards. So there's a good chance that the social conditions in which many people were socialized were just a little different. That's not an indictment on that whole generation, because as Maharaj points out, and many others are pointing out, actually the vast majority of devotees just are in disbelief, and it is affecting their faith and commitment to the institution. Saraswati, any thoughts on any of those comments?
Just thank you, and I'd like to see more comments or any questions.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at the end of the comments here. I mean, there's a couple more I could throw up, but I don't think they're introducing any new angles to explore. Any closing comments then, Saraswati?
I'll let Sanaka go first because he's my senior in this realm.
Something I've been thinking about recently is that when observing the phenomena that we've seen of ISKCON gurus defending their friends and the huge protest we've seen rise up in to defend Lakshmi Moni, and every time the actions of a senior leader are brought into question, there is his whole fan base comes up in arms, and we saw that with Lokanath. We see that when we point out that Indrajumna, it's not appropriate or not even safe for Indrajumna Maharaj to be touching children the way he does, and his whole disciples and fans and supporters, they come up in arms and protest. And they're enraged as devotees. They're experiencing, they're actually very angry. And what I see that they don't seem to be acknowledging, and maybe I'm being, what's the word? Judgmental, or I don't know. But what I see is that they're using their rage and they're using their words to attack child protection. They're undermining child protection. What they're saying is, I do not want to pay this personal price, which is incredibly uncomfortable for me to acknowledge that my favorite, this person that I really like, has done something inappropriate, that I'm willing to undermine child protection overall, just so that I don't experience this discomfort. And that's a very destructive mindset. And I encourage all the devotees, the entire devotee community. It's like, it might happen to any one of us. It's happened to me. And I'm sure it's happened. I know that it's happened to many devotees. If it does happen to you, I encourage you to really stop, pause for a second, and say, "What are you?" Just really look at what you're doing, and is that really what you want to do? I understand that it's painful when a friend is accused or shamed for what they've done, but does that justify that you use your voice to then undermine child protection? Is that really what you want to do? Because that's incredibly destructive. It's a disservice to Srila Prabhupada, to Vaishnava children, to society at large. It lowers the consciousness of society. It makes life easier. All these guys who are defending Lakshmi Moni in the name of justice, they're making life easier for child abusers in ISKCON. And I'm picking on Lakshmi Moni, but it's the same with Bhakti Vidyapurna, Damodar. You pick anyone, and their supporters, they use their voice to make life easier for child abuse. And that's horrendous when you actually think of what it's implied and what the consequences of blindly and reactively lashing out and engaging into this rage. And masking, and then it's masked as, oh no, I'm fighting for justice. Really, you're fighting for justice? Where were you? How come we've never heard you express your concern and fight for the justice of their victims? Like, what is this one-way street justice? Anyway,
it's really Twilight Zone, isn't it? Because in the face of a hue and cry, oh my goodness, our children are not safe, some people feel more inclined to say, hang on a minute, let's make sure the alleged people have a fair crack. Now, no one's arguing that they shouldn't have a fair crack, nor that there are problematic processes. They're simply making this allegation of problematic processes, and they've literally conjured it up simply to, discredit CPO. Saraswati, closing thoughts? I might have cut you off there, Sanaka, so let me know if there's any points you didn't get to. Saraswati, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if someone was genuinely concerned with ISKCON Child Protection Office case and saying it was mishandled and they had valid concerns, like, I would be open to listening. But a lot of these supposed concerns are like, happen to come from close friends, and they're defending leaders. And the usual defense is, well, I didn't see them abusing anyone, so it must not have happened. And anyway, I just want to say, like, I'm open-minded. Like, if there are valid concerns, I'm open to hearing. But a lot of this, like Jayadvaita Swami and Bhakti Vikash Swami, it's a little nonsensical. A lot nonsensical.
Shivaram
Anyway,
Swami.
thank you. What's that?
Shivaram Swami also.
Yeah, Shivaram Swami on multiple occasions. So thank you, Damodar, for getting us together and hosting this. Thank you very much.
It was well overdue. There is actually one comment Anjali has brought to my attention that perhaps, and you might be best suited to address this one, Saraswati. Summer's upon us. A lot of ISKCON temples like to offer kids camp. How safe are these programs? Is CPO requiring training?
Well, I would encourage her or anyone interested in the safety of the children to contact that specific camp and ask them, do you run background checks on the adults involved with the children? Do you have a local child protection team at your temple? Like, it all depends on the temple. The ISKCON Child Protection Office can only do so much. Like, they're so limited, and they will admit it. They're like, we need funding. Like, we are limited in what we can do. And I know the North American office for the Child Protection Office is pretty robust compared to other regions in the world. And every year they give out like awards to the top temples who comply with everything. And I think they make that list public. So you can look on their Facebook page and find the list, like the best temples that comply with everything. And that gives you a good idea of like who is making an effort to protect the children and who isn't.
A massive thank you to both of you for taking the time and trouble, not just on this call, but in general to, really champion child protection. Thank you to all our viewers for being engaged. Again, I'd encourage you to share if you found this conversation useful, you think others might benefit, just to help us as much as possible in the sponsoring awareness of this around the society. I think we are making a little bit of headway, but this was never going to be overnight. This culture did not get into this mess overnight, and it may take us a little while to iron out all the wrinkles and so on. So, Hare Krishna. Hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Hare Bolo.
Hare Krishna.